You know, back in the day, it always seemed like every first-party video game developer had some fair share of underrated and underappreciated games. And where Sega had the likes of Rystar, Nintendo had Kid Icarus. Although it definitely didn't soar in popularity like other Nintendo franchises, Kid Icarus for the NES was still a pretty sweet game. And I think I'm gonna review it. So, here we go. A really long time ago in some place called Angelland, it was a time of peace and prosperity, when mortals and gods alike were getting along in perfect harmony. Watching over the mighty kingdom of Angelland was the great goddess of light, Palutena, who showered the earth with rays of light that made the mortal people happy. Palutena's sister, Medusa, however, is a bitch and hates everything about humanity and wants to see them suffer a lot. Medusa's hateful contempt and reckless deeds caused Palutena to become pissed off, which resulted in her being transformed into a hideous-looking thing and being banished to the underworld. This in turn pissed Medusa off, as she would one day swear revenge. After making friends with all of the horrifying creatures of the underworld where she was banished, she declared war on Palutena and eventually won. Palutena and her army were no match for the evil Medusa and her evil army of twisted, demonic-looking things. In the end, Medusa won, and Palutena was held a prisoner in her own palace in the sky. Using her last bit of magical strength, she sets free a little angel boy who is trapped in the underworld. Enter Pit. This dude right here. Armed with only a magical bow and the hardly functional wings on his back, it is now this mortal angel's destiny to escape from the underworld, collect the 3 sacred treasures that Medusa stole from the Sky Palace and had guarded by a whole bunch of really weird-looking things, defeat Medusa herself, free Palutena, and transform Angelland back into the peaceful, prosperous, thriving world that it once was. And that's pretty much it. Sure, it's an NES story, so it's not really that crucial to the gameplay, but it does get some originality points. It was one of the first games to be based on Greek mythology, well, loosely based anyway, and seeing how other popular new generation games like God of War also use certain similar settings, this game definitely has to be given points for being a pioneer. So, woot. The game is pretty much an action platformer. A lot of the times you'll be running, jumping, and shooting stuff. Before you can even hope to take on the end boss of the game, you'll have to traverse through 3 different worlds: the Underworld, the Overworld, and Sky World. Kinda like Super Mario, each world has 4 different sections. The first 3 sections in each world are, well, platforming, running, jumping, and shooting. And the 4th section in each world is actually a dungeon-like fortress area, where you'll actually have to do a lot of exploring so you can find the boss in the area that's guarding one of the sacred treasures. One of the awesome things about this game is the fact that each world has its own different style of play. The Underworld and Skyworld are pretty much similar to each other because they're vertically scrolling. And then there's my personal favorite, the Overworld, which is actually a horizontal side-scrolling level, which is actually really cool. Then there are the fortress areas. They encourage a lot more exploration and even change the heads-up display a little bit so everything shows up on the bottom, and you see a lot more information too. Here, you traverse the enemy and booby-trap infested areas, taking down bad guys and freeing these little dudes that are carved in stone using hammers. These guys are actually the Angelland Centurions, members of Palutena's private army. You're gonna want to let loose as many of these things as possible because they'll help you out as soon as you encounter the boss, and that's always helpful. Then, just to make everything awesome, the final level is actually a horizontally moving shoot-'em-up level, kinda like Gradius. Now that's kick-ass. See, I always thought that was one of the cool selling points of this game. There are so many different styles of levels and so many ways to play the game, especially for its day. You didn't see anything like it back in the day. Kid Icarus really took everything that was awesome about the other big Nintendo games and combined it into one nice little package. You've got the organized world system and solid jumping controls like Mario, the really easy to handle shooting system of Metroid, and even a few light RPG elements like in Zelda. Or maybe Zelda 2, I don't know. But still, it was definitely one hell of an 8-bit package. The game was also one of the first in its kind to feature multiple endings, depending on how well you played the game. Depending on what score you got at the end, you would get a different ending. The higher your score, obviously the better the ending. Yay! You're a man now, Pit! The game is also one of the first of its kind to be considered way too long and way too difficult to be played in just one sitting, and so, therefore, a save system had to be implemented where you could save your progress. Unfortunately, though, this was only applied to the old Famicom disk system version in Japan. Here in North America, we are stuck with a hash-based password system, which is annoying as hell, but it did also lead to some inspiration to the nice fun art of RAM and ROM hacking. So I guess it's not all that bad, right? The password system was rather controversially annoying, mainly because even though getting the password and jotting it down was easy, reading your own handwriting later to input the password to continue playing after you shut the system off and turned it back on could be a bit of a bitch. Well, depending on how bad your handwriting is. Fortunately, there is a silver lining to compensate for all the annoyingness. As well as ROM hackers finding ways to crack the password code, making some really interesting codes that could pretty much god-mod the variables of the game, there are also a couple of really fun secret passwords that actually spelt words out. Whether it might be debatable whether or not Nintendo of America purposely implemented some of these passwords, I have a very hard time believing that this, and this are strictly just coincidental codes. I'm sorry, I just don't see how that works. While it's still kind of unclear as to just why exactly Nintendo didn't want to bring the FDS technology to North America, we would eventually be given the gift of being able to use save files with the introduction of battery-backed memory built into the cartridge after the release of The Legend of Zelda. Hooray! Well, time's a bitch and so is YouTube's time limit. Stay tuned for the rest of my Kid Icarus review on Part 2.